Well, considering I just did a video on top 5 reasons to buy the Honda CBR500, what better, I mean, you gotta follow that up at least with 5 reasons not to. You know, it's not all rainbows and unicorns all the time. So that's what we're gonna cover. And also, don't expect any highway runs in this video because it's like negative, it's like negative 40 at least outside. This bike sucks, man. It sucks. You see that? And real quick, if you're just here for the quick synopsis, you just want the top 5 reasons, I'm just gonna put them up here. That's the reasons, but they don't really mean anything until I've explained why. Like, price is both a reason why you should buy the CBR500 and also a reason why you shouldn't. So let's start right there. Price. How was price both in top 5 reasons to buy and top 5 reasons not to? Well, depends what we're comparing it to. In this case, I'm comparing it to other beginner class sport bikes. So I'm thinking CBR250, Ninja 400, obviously the CBR500, and how the price lines up in that area. So in that case, the CBR500R is probably one of the most expensive beginner bikes. You're looking at being set back close to $8,000 if you're buying this brand new. Now, I wouldn't exactly recommend buying brand new on your first bike or just starting to learn. That's just me personally. I don't want to wreck a brand new bike. I'd rather have a little bit less invested and at risk, so I tend to go used. But you know, personal preference there. And so comparing that brand new 500, setting you back about 8,000. Compare that to the Ninja 400 brand new, it's like 5,600, say 6,000. So you're looking at a $2,000 difference just between those two bikes, and then it's even bigger when you start looking at the CBR250, saving even more money. So if price is one of your main factors and considerations in getting these bikes, this is definitely something that might set you back on the 500. And that brings me to my second top 5 reason not to get this bike. It's weight. Weight in this sense is both but it depends on where you stand. It's both good and bad. In a lot of cases, it's bad for people who want a light bike because weight ultimately equals speed. So, you know, you got that. But the 500, the CBR500, is one of the heaviest in its class. It's much heavier than the 250 and heavier than the Ninja 400. Now, to me, that was actually one of the selling points. I wanted a heavier bike. And reason being is, in my previous video, I talked about how when I started on the 250, if I sneezed, the wind from a sneeze would blow me to the next lane. The bike is so light, you're just bullied all over the road. So comparing that to the 500, where it's, you know, another 100 pounds heavier than the 250, I'm playing it on the road. It's windy today. I'm not getting blown around. If I was on the 250, I might be in the other lanes by now. And the same thing goes for the Ninja 400. The Ninja 400 weighs pretty much, on paper, spec-wise, almost identical to the 250. So when I was looking at what bikes to get, and with my experience on the 250, I'm like, I don't want a bike that light. So that led me actually to a reason to want to buy the 500. But in many other cases, I know people often complain about the weight of the 500 being the heaviest in its class. So it's certainly something to take into consideration. It definitely takes away from the speed and all that, for sure. So if you want something a little snippier, a little more, hey, go with the 400. So that's one of the reasons why not to get this bike. So next up for me is top end speed and acceleration. It's really nothing to write home about. It's kind of abysmal. The top speed in general, I mean, I've hit 115 personally, I believe was my all-time. But you're probably looking at most often 110, 111 being your absolute top speed in most cases. That can be a con to many people, not fast enough. I would much rather prefer to go about 180 on some days, and I can't, so that's a reason why this isn't great. But more importantly is the top end acceleration. if you're at a higher rate of speed, 60, 70, even on the highways we're doing 80, and I mean I can wring out the throttle all the way max right now, and I it's not gonna throw me off. I can do it one-handed, I can do it relaxed, lean around. That's it right there. I mean, it's slow. I wouldn't say it's sluggish, but you know, it's just, it doesn't have a punch in the top ends like it does at the in the low end gears, first, second, and third. Once you start getting fifth, sixth, I mean, you got a real laggy response. Again, I think laggy is a bad word to use for it, because it's really not. It just doesn't have that top end power, like, you know, I don't even want to compare it to bikes that just aren't in its class, but you get what I'm saying. It's just, if you were doing 70 miles an hour and you want to do 90 within a second, that's not going to happen. The bike's got to climb up there. So you got to give it that time and allow it to get there. Alright, so real quick, here's an explanation of the top end acceleration that I'm talking about. It's pretty slow up top. So, I mean, that goes for max speed and acceleration. Let me get up to the top of this hill and I'll show you. If you're just cruising at a high speed, let's take about 80 for example, and you just lay on the throttle, full throttle. I mean, there you go. I mean, it got up to 90, obviously pretty quick, but I mean, it's slow. It's not a quick response. It's not, you know, it's not a snap to it. So your top end is really limited in that area. If you got to get out of a spot quick, I mean, it'll work, but like, it's not ideal. So overall, the top end speed and acceleration, it just isn't something to write home about. It's not fantastic. And another reason for not getting this bike is kind of a very surface level reason. Probably not something to take too seriously into consideration, but it's the stock exhaust, the sound of the bike. Don't listen to mine right now. It sounds wonderful. I got a slip-on on. But if you're going to get this bike, before you even turn it on, take off the stock exhaust. Heck, if you don't even have one to replace it with, just don't put anything there. It'll sound better. Stock exhaust is so terrible. The sound is just so unpleasant and so quiet. Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much ride through a church building and no one would know you were there. So if you're thinking about this bike, sound is oftentimes something people find very important. I mean, I know I was looking up the sound when I was first considering this bike originally. I'm like, man, what's that thing sound like? And I heard it, I'm like, oh god, that's upsetting. So if you're like me and you care about that kind of thing, well, now you know. It's definitely a con. You're going to want to slip on. And if you want something that you could just drop right on as soon as you get it, get the Coffman Shorty exhaust. It sounds great. It's what I'm using. It sounds a million times better than stock. I mean, like I said, anything sounds better than that. You could just take it off, put a playing card in your spokes, and it'll sound even better. But you know what I'm saying. So, sound and the exhaust. It's definitely a con for me. It's definitely a negative for most people. So, just something to keep in mind. Which brings me to my last and final reason is you can't do wheelies. You can't do darn wheelies. Okay, well you can. And I have both intentionally and accidentally done wheelies on here. But they're really only possible in first gear. And while in first gear, you're not doing much more than 15-20 miles an hour on here. So your wheelies are kind of just, you're not riding them. So for example, if you want to be someone that rides wheelies through the city center or gets on the highways and ride wheelies at 60-80 miles an hour, that's just impossible. Simply impossible. You want to do some fun little wheelies in first gear, you can get the bike up. It's fun. You can't ride them, but it's still fun. It's kind of possible, but it's really not. Like, all in all, said and done, this bike is not doing wheelies. Like I said, you can, but they're not the real wheelies you come to imagine or probably think about when thinking about wheeling a bike. So for me, that's a con. I want to do wheelies. I've been riding dirt bikes my whole life. I love to do wheelies, and I like to ride the wheelies. I'm also not great. I usually don't actually manage to ride them at all, but I like the option to try. So if that's something you want to do on here, not happening. So all in all, that's top 5 reasons why not to buy this bike. You got price. It's the most expensive in its class. You got weight. It's the heaviest in its class. You got a abysmal top end speed and acceleration. You got a horrible sounding exhaust, like default stock exhaust sounds like garbage, and you can't do wheelies. So you put that all together, it's just like, oh man, that's nasty. So definitely all things to take into consideration if you're looking at this bike. But all these same issues, sound and exhaust, wheelies, it's all subjective. You know, it depends on how, what do you care about, what do you like. I like to do wheelies and I like a good sounding bike, so that's definitely two things that made my list. In the end, all these reasons are really not terrible. I actually struggled trying to find 5 actually good reasons why not to get the bike. The bike is actually so good. So with that said, why don't you go and watch the top 5 reasons to buy this bike right here. I'll pop it up there. That's actually, this bike is such a compelling case for someone who's actually new to riding, even not new to riding. I've been riding this thing for over a year. I am not selling this thing anytime soon. I absolutely love this bike, and that's after a year of constant riding. It's literally December 17th. Like, it's winter time and I'm out here riding. I'm riding as much as I can. I love to ride this bike, so still trying to decide on, do I get this one, do I not? Just get it. Just get it. So with all that said, like I said earlier, you can't have a top 5 reasons to buy the bike without top 5 reasons not to. You got to look at all sides of the fence. Like I said, everything's not unicorns and rainbows all the time, even though this bike actually is, despite the whole top 5 reasons not to. You should just get the bike. It's a great beginner bike. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.